The big wooden doors of the church made a loud bang when I pushed them open. Everyone turned around at the same time, all 200 people wearing fancy clothes and holding flowers. The music stopped like someone had unplugged it. My sister Emily, standing at the front in her big white dress, dropped her pretty flowers. They fell on the floor with a soft sound. I stood there in my simple black dress, my heart beating so fast it felt like a drum was inside my chest. Everyone was staring at me with big round eyes and open mouths, like they were seeing a monster or a ghost. Because to them, I was supposed to be dead. "Hello, family," I said, and my voice was shaking like I was cold. "I'm back, and I'm very much alive." Emily's face turned as white as her dress. Mom grabbed Dad's arm so tight I could see her fingers turning white. The man Emily was going to marry looked back and forth between us like he was watching a tennis game and didn't know who was winning. But Dad's face made my heart hurt the most. He looked scared. Really, really scared. Like someone who got caught, stealing cookies from the cookie jar, but much, much worse. "Lina?" Dad whispered so quietly I could barely hear him. But you're supposed to be dead?" I said the word he couldn't say. "Yeah, that's what you told everyone, right, Dad? That's what you told this whole town 3 years ago. That your daughter Lina died in a big car crash. The church got so quiet you could hear a mouse walking. Even the little babies stopped making noise. Everyone was looking at me like I was a magic trick they couldn't understand." I started walking down the long aisle between all the chairs. My shoes made little clicking sounds on the hard floor. Each step felt heavy, like I was carrying a big backpack full of rocks. "The funny thing is," I said, my voice getting stronger like I was finding my power, "I never died. I lived through that crash. I got better, but somehow you all decided I was dead anyway." Emily finally found her voice. It sounded squeaky and scared. "Lina, please. Not here. Not today." "When then?" "Emily," I asked, stopping right in front of where she was standing. "When would be a good time to talk about how my own family made me disappear? How they had a funeral for me while I was in the hospital, fighting to stay alive?" The church exploded with whispers. People were talking to each other in quiet voices like bees buzzing in a hive. I could hear little pieces of what they were saying. Is that really her? But I went to her funeral. What's happening? This can't be real. Mom stood up from her special chair in the front row. Her makeup was running down her face like black rivers. "Lina, sweetie, please, let's talk about this at home." "Home?" I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that happens when something is so sad it becomes funny. "What home, Mom?" "The home where you turned my bedroom into a place for visitors to sleep. The home where you put all my pictures in a box and hid them in the basement. The home where you told everyone your daughter was dead?" The old priest with kind eyes tried to step forward. "Maybe we should—" "No," I said in a strong voice. "I've been quiet for 3 years. 3 whole years of hiding. 3 years of being told I was too much trouble. 3 years of being invisible like a ghost. Today everyone gets to know what really happened." I turned around to face all the wedding guests. These were people I grew up with. My old neighbors, kids I went to school with, teachers who taught me, people who came to my fake funeral and cried fake tears for me. 3 years ago, I began, and my voice carried through the whole church like I was using a microphone. I was 18 years old. I had just finished high school. I was going to start college. I had big dreams. I had plans for my future. And I had a family who I thought loved me no matter what. My voice cracked a little when I said loved me, but I kept talking. Then one night, I was driving home from my best friend's house. It was raining really hard. The roads were slippery like ice. A big truck ran through a red light and crashed right into my little car. The crash was so strong, it flipped my car over 3 times. I could see people in the crowd putting their hands over their mouths. Some were starting to cry. Others looked really angry. I woke up in the hospital 2 whole weeks later. 2 weeks where I was sleeping so deep I couldn't wake up, fighting to stay alive. When I finally opened my eyes, I thought I would see my family there. I thought I would see worried faces and happy tears because their daughter, their sister, was okay. I stopped talking and looked right at my parents. Mom was crying so hard her whole body was shaking. Dad was looking at the floor like it was the most interesting thing in the world. But instead, I continued, the nice nurses told me something that broke my heart into a million pieces. They told me my family had already had my funeral. They told me that while I was lying there with machines helping me breathe, fighting to live, my parents had told everyone I was dead. They had people send flowers to my grave. They had a big, sad ceremony. They buried an empty box in the ground and pretended I was inside it. The sounds from the crowd were so loud they bounced off the church walls. People were gasping and saying, "Oh my God," and "How could they?" Emily stepped toward me with tears in her eyes. "Lina, you don't understand what really happened." "I understand everything," I said, and my voice got hard like a rock. "I understand that you thought I was too broken to fix. I understand that helping me cost too much money. I understand that it was easier to let everyone think I was dead than to take care of a daughter who needed help." I could see some people in the crowd starting to stand up, looking really mad at my parents. Others were crying. The church was full of so many big feelings it felt like the air was thick and hard to breathe. "But here's what you didn't think would happen," I said, turning back to Emily. "I got better. Not just my body, but my heart and my mind too. And I've spent 3 years getting strong enough to come back here and tell everyone the truth." I looked at Emily. Really looked at her. She was so beautiful in her wedding dress, but her eyes were full of shame and fear. "I know why you never told him about me," I said, pointing to the man she was supposed to marry. "I know why your husband-to-be doesn't know you have a sister. Because telling him I exist means telling him what this family did. It means admitting that you threw away your own sister like she was garbage." The man Emily was going to marry looked at her with confusion and hurt in his eyes. "Emily, what is she talking about? You told me you were an only child. You never said you had a sister." Emily's voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. I can't explain this now." "Oh, but I can explain it," I said with a smile that wasn't nice at all. "I can explain everything, including the biggest secret of all, the real reason why they wanted me gone forever." I paused and looked around the church at all the shocked faces. You see, it wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about medical bills. There's something much worse that they've been hiding. Something that will destroy this perfect little family image they've built. Emily looked at me with pure terror in her eyes. "Lina, please don't." Emily knew I was alive, I announced to the entire church. She visited me in the hospital. She knew I was getting better. And she's the one who told me I had to stay dead forever. The church exploded into chaos. People were yelling and standing up and pointing fingers. But I wasn't done yet. "But that's not even the worst part," I shouted over the noise. "The worst part is why she wanted me to stay dead. The worst part is the secret that Emily has been hiding from everyone. including her precious fiancé. Just as I was about to reveal the truth that would destroy everything, the secret that would ruin Emily's life forever, something happened that nobody expected. Emily's fiancé, the man who thought he was marrying an only child, stepped forward with fire in his eyes. "Stop," he said in a voice so loud it made everyone be quiet. "Before you say another word, I have something to tell everyone too." He looked at Emily with disgust and anger. "Because I already know the secret you're talking about. I've known for months." Emily went completely white and started swaying like she might fall down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily's fiancé announced to the whole church, "let me tell you what kind of woman I almost married." And that's when Emily collapsed again, just like she did in my story before. But this time, as she fell to the ground, in her white dress, a piece of paper fell out of her bouquet. I picked it up and read it. My hands started shaking. It was a medical report, dated from 3 years ago, the day after my accident, and it changed everything I thought I knew about what really happened to me. The piece of paper in my hand felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Everyone in the church was looking at me while the paramedics helped Emily. She was awake now but looked like she had seen a ghost. I opened the folded paper with shaking fingers. At the top it said, "Confidential Medical Report," in big red letters. My name was on it, and the date was from 3 years ago, the day after my car accident. As I read it, my legs felt like they might give out from under me. "Patient Lina Rodriguez shows remarkable recovery speed," I read out loud so everyone could hear. "Brain scans show no permanent damage. Patient is expected to make full recovery within 2 to 3 months. Recommend continued treatment and family support." The church got so quiet you could hear people breathing. "Expected to make full recovery," I repeated, my voice getting louder. "No permanent damage." I looked at my parents, who were holding on to each other like they might fall down. "This report says I was going to be fine," I said, walking toward them. "This report says the doctors knew I was going to get completely better. So why did you tell everyone I was dying?" Dad opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a fish trying to breathe air. Mom finally spoke, but her voice was so shaky I could barely understand her. "Lina, please, there's more to the story." "More?" I held up the paper. "This says everything. The doctors told you I was going to be okay, but you told the whole town I was dying. You lied to everyone." Emily's fiancé, whose name I learned was David, was still standing at the altar. He looked at Emily lying on the stretcher and shook his head. "Tell them, Emily," he said, in a voice full of disappointment. "Tell them why you really wanted your sister to stay dead." Emily tried to sit up on the stretcher. The paramedics told her to stay lying down, but she pushed them away. "I can't," she whispered. "Then I will," David said, and he turned to face all the wedding guests. 6 months ago, I hired a private investigator to look into Emily's family, he announced. I wanted to surprise her by finding relatives she might have lost touch with. What I found instead was that she had a very much alive sister who she had been lying about for 3 years. People in the crowd started talking again, but David held up his hand to make them stop. "But that's not all I found," he continued. "I also found out why Emily wanted everyone to think her sister was dead." I felt my heart start beating really fast again. There was more. What else had my family been hiding from me? David pulled out his own piece of paper from his jacket pocket. "This is a copy of our father's will," he said, looking right at me. "Our father?" I said, confused. "But Dad is right there." "Not your dad," David said gently. Emily's real father, the man who raised you both, but who wasn't your biological father. I felt like the world was spinning around me. What are you talking about? Mom let out a sob that was so loud it echoed through the church. Lina, we never wanted you to find out this way. Find out what? I demanded. David looked sad as he explained. Your mom was married to another man before she married. The man you call Dad. That man, Emily's biological father, died when Emily was little. But before he died, he left everything to Emily in his will. His house, his money, everything. I looked at Emily, who was crying on the stretcher. But there was one condition in the will, David continued. Emily could only inherit everything if she was his only living child. If he had other children who were still alive, the money would have to be split between them. I felt like I was going to throw up. But I'm not his biological child. No, Mom said through her tears. But legally you were. When I married Emily's father, he adopted you. That made you his legal daughter, even though he wasn't your real dad. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, and the picture they made was ugly. So when Emily's father died, I said slowly, I was supposed to get half of his money. $2 million, David said, split between two sisters. But if one sister was dead, the other sister gets everything, I finished. Emily finally found her voice. I was going to share it with you, she cried from the stretcher. I swear I was. But then the accident happened, and the medical bills were so expensive, and I thought maybe it was a sign. A sign? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You thought my car accident was a sign that you should steal my inheritance? It wasn't like that. Emily sat up despite the paramedics trying to keep her down. The doctors said you might die anyway, and even if you lived, they said you might have brain damage. I thought, you thought it would be easier to just let me die and take all the money for yourself, I said, my voice getting cold and hard. Mom stepped toward me. Lina, you have to understand. Emily needed that money for medical school. She had worked so hard. And what about what I worked hard for? I shouted. What about my college plans? What about my dreams? What about my life? I looked around the church at all the people who were supposed to care about me. Friends, neighbors, teachers, family friends. People who had come to my fake funeral and cried fake tears. All of you, I said to the crowd. You all believed my family when they said I was dead. You sent flowers to my grave. You probably told stories about what a sweet girl I was. But none of you, not one of you, ever asked to see my body. None of you ever questioned why the coffin stayed closed at the funeral. People started looking uncomfortable and looking down at their feet. You want to know why? I continued. Because the coffin was empty. They buried an empty box and told everyone. I was inside it. A woman in the third row stood up. I recognized her as Mrs. Patterson, my old math teacher. But Lina, we trusted your parents. Why would they lie about something so horrible? I pointed at Emily. $2 million. That's why. The church exploded into angry voices again. People were yelling things like, how could you do this? And, this is sick, and, those poor girls. But I wasn't done telling the truth yet. There's more, I said, and my voice cut through all the noise like a knife. Because 3 years ago, when I finally got out of the hospital and found out what my family had done, I didn't just disappear quietly like they wanted me to. Emily looked at me with terror in her eyes. She knew what I was about to say. I fought back, I continued. I hired a lawyer. I challenged the will. I demanded my half of the inheritance. I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. And you know what I found out? Emily had already spent most of the money on medical school and her fancy apartment and her expensive car. She couldn't pay me back even if she wanted to. David stared at Emily like he was seeing her for the first time. You told me your parents paid for medical school. You told me you lived simply and saved money. I lied, Emily whispered. I lied about everything. So 3 years ago, I said, Emily made me a deal. She said if I stayed dead, if I never told anyone I was alive, she would pay me a little bit of money every month, just enough to survive. She said it was better than nothing. I pulled out my phone and showed it to the crowd. And I have every text message, every email, every payment record that proves it. 3 years of hush money to keep me quiet about. The fact that my own sister stole my inheritance and let everyone think I was dead. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt like the whole world had stopped. But Emily made one mistake, I said, looking at her with satisfaction. She never expected me to get strong enough to fight back. She never expected me to build my own life without her dirty money. And she definitely never expected me to show up at her wedding and expose her to the man she was about to marry. I turned to David. That's why she never told you about me. Not just because she was ashamed of what she did, but because she was terrified you'd find out she's been paying me hush money with your shared savings account. David's face went from sad to furious. My savings account? Emily? You've been stealing from me too? But before Emily could answer, something happened that shocked everyone in the church, including me. The back doors of the church opened again, and 3 people in dark suits walked in. FBI, the first man announced, showing his badge. We're here to arrest Emily Rodriguez for insurance fraud, inheritance fraud, and conspiracy to commit identity theft. As the FBI agents walked down the aisle toward Emily, she looked at me with pure hatred. You did this, she hissed. You called them. I looked at her. This person who used to be my big sister, who used to protect me and love me and promise she'd never let anything bad happen to me. No, Emily, I said sadly. You did this to yourself. But as they put handcuffs on Emily right, there in her wedding dress, she shouted something that made my blood run cold. You think you know everything, Lina? You think you've won? Well, you don't know the biggest secret of all. You don't know what really happened the night of your accident. The FBI agents tried to quiet her, but she kept screaming as they dragged her away. Ask Mom and Dad about the phone call. Ask them why they were so sure you were going to die. Ask them what they did to make sure you'd never wake up. And that's when I realized that everything I thought I knew about my accident, about my family, about the last 3 years of my life, was about to change again. The church was in complete chaos after Emily's arrest. People were crying, yelling, taking pictures with their phones. The FBI agents had taken Emily away in handcuffs, still wearing her wedding dress. David just stood there looking like his whole world had fallen apart. But Emily's last words kept echoing in my head. Ask them about the phone call. I walked over to my parents, who were huddled together in the front row, looking terrified. Mom was shaking so hard she could barely sit up. Dad kept running his hands through his hair like he was trying to pull thoughts out of his head. What? Phone call? I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Dad looked up at me with eyes full of fear. Lina, please. Not here. Not now. Yes, here. Yes, now. I shouted so loud that everyone in the church stopped talking and looked at us. I'm done with secrets. I'm done with lies. What phone call was Emily talking about? Mom started crying even harder. We never meant for it to go so far. What? Phone. Call? I repeated each word like I was talking to a small child. Dad stood up slowly, like an old man, even though he was only 50. He looked around the church at all the people staring at us, then back at me. The night of your accident, he said in a voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear him. Emily called us from the hospital. So? I crossed my arms and waited. She called us before the doctors had even finished examining you, Mom added through her tears, before they knew how bad you were hurt. I felt a cold chill run down my back. What did she tell you? Dad's hands were shaking as he spoke. She said the doctors told her you were brain dead. She said they told her you would never wake up. She said we needed to come to the hospital right away to make decisions. But that wasn't true, I said, remembering the medical report. The doctor said I was going to be fine. We didn't know that, Mom whispered. Emily was the one talking to the doctors. She was the one who spoke medical language. We trusted her to tell us what they said. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I didn't like the picture they were making. Emily lied to you about what the doctors said, I realized. She made you think I was dying when I wasn't. She said we had to make a choice, Dad continued. She said the machines were keeping you alive, but that you were already gone. She said the kindest thing would be to... He couldn't finish the sentence. To let me die. I finished for him. Mom nodded, crying so hard she could barely breathe. She said it would be expensive to keep you on machines when there was no hope. She said it would bankrupt our family for nothing. So you agreed, I said, and I could hear my own voice getting strange and hollow. We signed papers, Dad admitted. Papers that said we wanted to stop treatment. I felt like the floor was falling out from under me. You tried to kill me. No. Mom stood up so fast she almost fell over. We thought we were being kind. We thought you were suffering. Emily showed us documents from the doctors that said you had no brain activity. Documents that Emily faked, I said, understanding finally dawning on me. We didn't know, Dad pleaded. She was in medical school. She understood all the medical terms we couldn't understand. We trusted her. I looked around the church at all. The people who were still listening to every word. Some looked horrified, others looked angry, and a few looked like they felt sorry for my parents. But I didn't die, I said. So what happened? Mom and Dad looked at each other like they were having a silent conversation with their eyes. Tell her, said a voice from the back of the church. Everyone turned around to see who had spoken. It was an older woman in a nurse's uniform. I recognized her immediately. It was Mrs. Kim, the head nurse from the hospital where I had been a patient. She walked down the aisle toward us, her shoes clicking on the stone floor. I was there that night, Mrs. Kim said, looking at my parents with disgust. I was there when you came to sign those papers. She turned to me, and her eyes were kind but sad. Your parents came to the hospital ready to disconnect your life support. Machines. They had been told you were brain dead. But I wasn't, I said. No, you weren't. And when I looked at your real medical charts, I could see that. Your brain activity was normal. You were healing. You were going to wake up. Mrs. Kim looked back at my parents. I told them that their daughter was not brain dead. I showed them the real medical reports. I explained that Emily had been lying to them. I stared at my parents. So you knew. You found out Emily was lying, but you still let everyone think I was dead." Dad hung his head in shame. "By then, Emily had already told everyone you were dead. She had already started planning the funeral. She said it would be too embarrassing to admit we had lied." Too embarrassing? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was lying in a hospital bed, and you were worried about being embarrassed? "Emily convinced us it was better this way," Mom said desperately. "She said the insurance money would help us start over. She said you could start over too, with a new identity, in a new place. She made it sound like it would be good for everyone." Mrs. Kim shook her head. "What they're not telling you is that I threatened to report them to the police if they went through with it. I told them I would make sure everyone knew the truth." "So what stopped you?" I asked. "Emily did," Mrs. Kim said sadly. "She came to me the next day with a proposal. She said if I kept quiet about what happened, she would take care of you personally. She would make sure you got the medical care you needed. She would pay for everything out of the inheritance money." "And you believed her?" I was shocked that this kind nurse had been fooled too. "She showed me bank statements. She showed me medical school acceptance letters. She convinced me that she was going to use her inheritance to become a doctor, and then dedicate her life to helping you recover." Mrs. Kim's voice was full of regret. "I thought I was doing what was best for you." "But she didn't help me," I said. "She paid for the bare minimum to keep me alive, then made me disappear." Mrs. Kim nodded. "I realized that about 6 months later when I tried to check on you and found out you had been moved to a different hospital with no forwarding information. That's when I knew Emily had played us all." I turned back to my parents. "So you let everyone believe I was dead, collected insurance money, and allowed Emily to make me disappear, all so you wouldn't have to admit you made a mistake." Neither of them could look at me. "And for 3 years," I continued, my voice getting stronger, "you let me live like a ghost while Emily paid me hush money to stay hidden. You let me struggle to rebuild my life from nothing while you lived comfortably in the house that should have been half mine." "We didn't know you were struggling," Mom said weakly. "You didn't want to know," I corrected her. "Because knowing would have meant admitting what you did was wrong." I looked around the church one more time at all the faces of people who had known me my whole life. "This is what my family did to me," I announced to everyone. "They tried to kill me when I was hurt. When that didn't work, they erased me from existence. They stole my inheritance, took my identity, and made me disappear. All for money." I walked toward the church doors, then turned back for one final statement. "But here's what they didn't count on," I said, my voice carrying through the entire building. "They didn't count on me being stronger than they thought. They didn't count on me rebuilding my life without them. And they definitely didn't count on me coming back to expose the truth." I pulled out my phone and held it up. "Everything you just heard has been recorded and sent to the FBI, the insurance company, and 3 news stations. By tonight, this whole town will know exactly what kind of people you are." Mom started sobbing again. "Lina, please, we're still your family." "No," I said firmly. "You stopped being my family the night you tried to let me die. You stopped being my family when you chose money over your daughter. You stopped being my family when you decided it was easier to erase me than to love me." I walked toward the door, then paused. "There's one more thing you should know," I said. "The inheritance money that Emily stole? The lawyer I hired found a way to get it back. Every penny, plus 3 years of interest, plus damages for emotional distress. As of this morning, Emily's bank accounts have been frozen and the money is being transferred to me." I smiled And this time it was a real, genuine smile. I'm not just getting my life back. I'm getting everything that was stolen from me. And I'm going to use that money to help other people who have been abandoned by their families, just like I was. As I walked out of that church, leaving my parents sitting there in shock and shame, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Freedom. 6 months later, I was standing in front of a beautiful building with a sign that said, the Lina Rodriguez Center for Family Crisis Support. It was a place where people who had been abandoned or betrayed by their families could come for help, support, and legal assistance. Mrs. Kim was there with me, along with David, who had become a good friend and supporter, and about 50 other people whose families had thrown them away for various reasons. Today, I said at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, we're not just opening a building. We're opening our arms to people who have been told they don't matter. We're opening our hearts to people who have been erased by the people who should have loved them most. A reporter asked me, do you have any regrets about exposing your family the way you did? I thought about that for a moment. Emily was in prison for fraud. My parents had lost their house when the insurance company sued them for the money back. The whole town knew the truth about what they had done. No, I said honestly. I don't have any regrets, because sometimes the truth hurts, but living a lie hurts more. As for my family, Emily would be in prison for another 2 years. My parents moved to a different state to escape the shame and gossip. They tried to contact me once through a lawyer, asking for forgiveness. I wrote them a letter back. It was short. I forgive you because carrying anger hurts me more than it hurts you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you again. Forgiveness doesn't mean we're family again. It just means I'm choosing to move forward with my life instead of staying stuck in the past you created. You made your choice 3 years ago when you decided money was more important than your daughter. Now I'm making my choice. I choose to live. I choose to help others. I choose to build a new family with people who know how to love without conditions. Goodbye. I never heard from them again. My name is Lina Rodriguez. I'm 24 years old. I survived a car accident, a fake funeral, family betrayal, and 3 years of being treated like I was dead. But more than that, I learned that sometimes the family you're born into isn't your real family. Sometimes your real family is the people who choose to love you when everyone else walks away. I learned that money can make people do terrible things, but it can't buy back love once it's lost. Most importantly, I learned that you can't bury someone who refuses to stay dead. This is my story. This is my life. This is proof that no matter how hard people try to erase you, you have the power to write your own ending. And my ending? It's not really an ending at all. It's a beginning. Now I want to hear from you in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in my situation? Would you have handled it the same way I did? Would you have been able to forgive your parents, even if you couldn't forget? Or would you have made them pay in ways that I chose not to? Maybe you would have exposed them sooner, the moment you woke up in that hospital. Maybe you would have taken the hush money and disappeared forever. Maybe you would have shown up at that wedding with the police already waiting outside. Tell me, what would you have done differently? How would you have gotten justice? This story shows us that sometimes the family we're born into isn't our real family. Sometimes our real family is the people who choose to stand by us when everyone else walks away. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't getting revenge. It's refusing to let other people's betrayal define your future. If this story moved you, If it made you think about what real family means, please hit that like button right now. And if you want to hear more incredible true stories about survival, betrayal, and the strength of the human spirit, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change how you see the world. Thanks for listening to Lina's story. Until next time, remember, you're stronger than you think, and your story isn't over yet.